and welcome back to another episode of Let Me Hear from Doc. I'm your host, Amanda Chapal George, and with me is Dr. the Right Honorable Keith Claudius Mitchell. Dr. Mitchell, how are you doing?
Fine. Of course, looking forward to today's session.
As always, I know some time back, before we jump into all the hardcore questions, some time back you told me about your book. How is that going for you?
We had the gentleman who was working with me had a sort alternative issue that he had to work on, so we had a break for about 2 months. We should be restarting the process. We have had about 13 chapters already, but we should be continuing. I want to be able to complete this by the end of the year or early next year. I want to make sure that history is well known and documented. Right?
I like that. I'm definitely looking forward to that as a writer and uh lover of books and history. I think Grenada and the world by extension would appreciate your stories, because they're very interesting. I remember looking at you at a very young age, and I just want to say, Doc, thank you so much for your contribution. Yeah, you have been one of my inspiration to be here today. I never thought I would have gotten in politics, but you have inspired me to push further and to push harder. So I really want to commend you for that, you know. But
But I just felt it's important. Too many of our people over the years have served this country and made enormous contribution in several fields, and there's been no documentation about that given by themselves, and I think it's a fundamental mistake. For example, Sir Matthew Gary never wrote anything. Whatever is written on him is written by people's perception of his work. And that to me is unfortunate, because I think you owe it to future generations that they must know what you're, particularly coming from where we come from, and Gary came from poverty. And of course, and the country area that he came from, and achieved a lot, and had the kind of character to stand up to the most powerful nation in the world at that time, the British. So you have to give him a lot of credit. And he wasn't perfect. He made mistakes in government and otherwise. But the fact is, he had a pretty colorful story, and that should have had more. And I did my best to get him to write, and we promised over and over, but then he never did. My own view is I thought he couldn't come to terms with his own mortality. And we all have to come to terms with that. And I think that was my own assessment of why he didn't do it and so on.
well, thank you for that. And let's jump right into our segment today. We have so much to talk about: the rising cost of living, the electoral office. So many things going on in Grenada, Carriacou, and PC Martinique. But let's talk about the Prime Minister right now. He refuses to live in that official residence and spends over $20,000 a month on rent. What does that say to ordinary Grenadians who are struggling to pay theirs?
Well, I think it's so my feeling about this is that I think the country as a whole, persons who are very vocal about the less important things appear to be almost their mouth completely shut when something. Could you imagine I had done something like this? And as I kept saying to people, previous prime ministers over the years, from Gary upwards to myself, used the official residence at Maguire, which was to me more than adequate for the prime minister of the country. But the gentleman never was involved in politics or social life in the country. Came in and maybe decided that that was not good enough for him. So he has contracted the country to spend $20,000 plus a month. And not a word is said, not a drum was beaten at the time. And that to me is quite a reflection of not just taking, clearly it's a reflection of his character, but also clearly a reflection of some of the persons who appear to want to us to feel that they had the concerns of the country when they were criticizing even actions of the former government or our government, which were not accurate. They were out there criticizing and making comments when appeared to be mouth shut now, which is quite revealing, and so on. So I think it's a sad thing because $20,000 plus a month is a lot of money, and it could provide a lot of relief to so many persons in the country, especially now. And around the country, there is tremendous amount of pain and suffering. People do not have jobs. People do not have any sense of direction. The young people in particular, whose future are at stake, are not feeling anything hopeful, and so on. The boys in the block, they're out there. When you pass different blocks, and many times they're out there playing cards or dominoes or whatever. Nothing productive for themselves. I'm talking during the day. I'm talking evening time when you're relaxing. And the young girls are at home without hope. And many of them come to my office, and I feel sorry for them because I know the temptations that are out there and what could happen to a young girl or a young boy who feel a sense of hopelessness and may be tempted to do things that can have this serious implications for their own future. And that must concern those of us who have the responsibility now at this point to guide the affairs of the country and to make sure that the country provides hope for the young people of our land.
You spoke a lot about the crisis of our young people. So how do you feel about the Prime Minister's frequent overseas travel while local cries go unresolved?
First of all, if you check the budget for overseas travels of ministers of the previous government, it was very minimal, less than $1 million. We certainly can't remember for a year-to-year basis, but it was certainly not anything close to that. But everyone is traveling today, everybody, and it seems like they have little accountability about decisions of delegation size and the costs related to travels. I think that's fundamental. I remember in the early part of our government that we did not have a system in place, and there was a certain level of abuse, not just by political persons, but by public servants and others. And we instituted a system. Anyone in the government service, whether it's a politician or public, who wish to travel and undergo expenses by government, the recommendation must come to cabinet, and the rationale for the travel must be provided, and the cost of the travel must be assessed before a decision to travel. Even the Prime Minister travel, unless it's personal, and if it's paid for by the taxpayers, had to come to cabinet too for assessment. But I'm not sure that that system is maintained, and if it's maintained, it shows that everyone in the cabinet is supporting a free for all as far as the expenditure. It's very unfortunate though that when you look at the fact that sacrifices of previous governments were made to ensure that we reached a very strong fiscal situation. And this present government came into office with the country's fiscal situation being quite strong. And they just seem to go on a spending free, and everyone enjoying themselves and doing whatever they can to enjoy life, so to speak. And that was not the priority of the government of the island. And I know some of my colleagues they felt I was too strong in my discipline with respect to expenditure and so on. But I took my responsibility as Prime Minister and to safeguard the resources of the country, knowing that our country wasn't exporting oil, and our oil revenues coming by millions. And therefore, with the limited resources, we had to be careful that it must be spent in an optimal way, and I conducted the government with regard to that understanding. And sometimes they call it tough, and sometimes I ask myself, why should I have asked the government ministers then to make all that sacrifice and to watch others who never did much for the country, but were just voted in by the people, and that's the right of the people to choose their government. And now enjoying just doing what they want and just living nice, and that is a bit uncomfortable for me, because you are saying, and then why should they have made all that sacrifice? Why did I put them through all this? I sometimes question myself about that, but that's life. But I just hope and pray people understand who cares about the country, who made sacrifices for this country, and who are enjoying just the life for themselves and not putting the country first before their own personal situation.
Yeah, I agree. The sacrifices that you made were not in vain. It was for the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and P.T. Martinique.
But what I mean is, it's not about sacrifice for me, because as I told people before, some people, when they get into a situation like this, they never lived a life of opportunities. But in my past life as a professor and a consultant that I did internationally, I traveled all over the world. I mean, I lived in the best hotels. I drove the best vehicles in Washington, so that was not, the material things didn't mean a lot to me. But for someone who did never had this and reach in a position, there must be a control mechanism to keep people under control with respect to their behavior. And so it was not about me, and I felt I felt I had all these privileges before, so I'm not missing anything. I don't do a lot of travels now. Whenever I travel, it's because it's absolutely necessary, because there's nothing there for me to learn and to see, and so on, that I did not have opportunities before. But I feel for members of my government whom I know would have probably loved to travel more, and some of the people that worked, not necessarily political persons, work with the government, and that's only my I would say regret, but sometimes I question myself about.
You spoke about systems. Do you believe that the Prime Minister's foreign trips are yielding tangible results for Grenadians? Or
Well,
is it more
well,
PR?
if it's yielding, I certainly have not seen it.
Hmm.
So, and since he has not reported when he returns, every visit I made outside of the country on behalf of the taxpayers and funded by friendly governments and so on, when I returned, I reported on the visit and what resulted from the visit. So people have no doubt. But you just hear a story, and it's not just about the Prime Minister. I think it's about the members of the government. I don't want to single out just an individual. Sometimes you hear 3 ministers out in the country. You never saw anything that says they're going and what they're going for and who is paying. They are responsible. When you become someone in a position of a government leadership, in whatever position, whether minister or prime minister, whatever, then you have a responsibility to account for the time you spend inside the country, for inside and outside of the country, in particular outside. And therefore, it's not something that is it's something that you are you are forced to do. It's something that you have to do, because you are not there on your own. You are accountable to the people of the country, and when you're spending the resources, you have no choice but to account why these resources are being expended and the value of it. So I am not just going to single out one person. I think every single individual who travels on behalf of the country, when he or she returns, you ought to be given a report and the purpose of the visit and the results of the visit. That's not something that we should be asking for. That's a necessity, and that's why I cannot understand how some of this the social partners that we had in place are saying absolutely nothing about some of the blatant disregard of fundamental accountability and so on. You know, and therefore I always wonder because, you know, my brother Tillman used to always be talking about accountability and transparency. And sometimes and even when we were very transparent and very accountable, he was making the statement. They were nice words, but I don't hear his voice anymore. So I just went to call on him to, as Mr. Accountability and Mr. Transparency, my brother Tillman, I want to hear your voice to speak out about what is taking place in the present government and guide them accordingly about their fundamental responsibility for what you espoused, transparency and accountability.
Speaking on these matters, Dr. Mitchell, people were promised, the people of Grenada were promised by the stroke of a pen they would be permanent. You know, pens, we spoke about pensions, they spoke about 500 homes, and, you know, a lot of other things. And almost 2, 3 years later, many are still waiting. What
3 years, next month is 3 years.
What message does that send about trust in leadership?
Well, I think over the years, people would tell you over and over they have serious concerns about politicians and what they say. When I got involved, I knew that was the atmosphere that politicians say any and anything to get elected. And I did plan to make sure that I must not be seen as that type of politician. So I was reluctant to say anything that I believe cannot be done, but say it for what, just because I expect to get votes from it. I was very concerned about not being perceived as a traditional politician. And I think my record stands by itself. Not everything I said came out as I indicated, but that's your human. If you believe that something is possible and you make a statement to that regard, then you take responsibility. But I would be the first person to admit when it didn't work out and give the reason for it. And I think that is extremely important. And I did give you an example of a public statement that I made on a national broadcast based on a mistake that I made. And I think it's only, to me, big people admit their errors and correct it, don't repeat it. But persons are immature, try to imply they were right when it's so obvious that you are wrong. And that to me it's how one should operate. But it's clear to me that they need to be more vocal, not just the official opposition, because everything the official opposition says does always tend to be seen in a political context, and people might oppose it or support it based on your political association. And therefore, someone with no bent political position is in a stronger position to offer serious statements on issues that appear to be obviously so false or wrong. And I think that we find that we are shortchanging the population by not enough independent voices coming out and speaking out on important matters that concerns the present situation and the future of this country.
The government is pushing for a multi-million-dollar hospital, but our current hospitals are under-equipped and understaffed. What does that say about our priorities?
It seems to me that NDC as a party has a fixation with a new hospital, because some years ago, another NDC government, the first one did talk about in Parliament about new hospital. Nothing came out of it. The second one came in, and they even had a massive drawing, and they put it up just for the police giving signal, and you can't help seeing it. Big drawing, man, new hospital coming with all sorts of beautiful diagrams and so on, and it was clear. Nothing came out of it. Now, this present government is coming and telling you that big announcement, new hospital. What does that mean? Now, remember, you just made the point. You have the present hospital. You can't say it's a shabby physical structure. Mm-hmm. But the problem is not the structure. Basic medicine, basic services not available. The incentive for the medical staff not there. The incentive for the ordinary staff, security, the orderlies and so on, not there. So the motivational level for service among the staff is very low. So you're not concerned about that. Basic medication that, for example, almost every black person sometime in their life would have suffered with high blood pressure. That you can't get the medication for. You need a basic blood test. I had to get one from my mom. You had to go up to St. Augustine to do one, and so on. So you're not providing basic services. What you're talking about, a new building. You're building, and I don't care who you're talking about bringing, because I hear about the hospital services from New York involved, but I mean, they don't come cheap. They don't. Mount Sinai, is that what it is? Sinai, yeah. I mean, they don't come cheap. And even in North America, there's serious problems with the services that people have to receive for basic medical help. Because if you do not have the serious resources, you can't pay for it. So Mount Sinai, whoever it is not the miraculous solution to the medical care in the country. I mean, it sounds, and again, it shows the deceptive nature of the government. Make you believe this special hospital services is coming and the problem going to be solved overnight. And you and I know nothing like that will come in the next few years. It's not going to come. But so you could go out in an election and say, vote for me again, because you're going to get this hospital coming when we made an announcement. Nonsense. And solve the basic problem now. If you want to build a new hospital and you have the resources, then proceed to do it at the right time, but solve the basic thing. Don't let a lot of innocent people die now before a new hospital and new services come on board. And I think this is something that people need to speak about a lot more. And the fact is, I'm hearing the figure of over $400 million for a new hospital. Who's going to pay for this? Future generations of the country. When we did made all our efforts to bring down the debt of the country and make it manageable and have savings and surpluses that you can invest in the capital stock of the country and create jobs and all that has gone. And now you're creating more problems by putting a massive debt for new building and new services at the hospital because of your ego. It's all about ego and about your tomfoolery to close the eyes of the people of the country. And I think Grenadians have to be awakened. And that's why I said again, Amanda, I repeat, I think we have a fundamental problem with the stakeholders of this country. The so-called independent groups that used to be so vocal. Where are your voices now? When now we have absolute facts what is taking place in the country with a level of deceit in the country going forward, and you're not hearing anything. And it's so sad. But as long as I have the breath of life, I will do my share and speak out of these fundamental issues.
Doc will talk.
Doc will talk.
We're about to wrap up, Dr. Mitchell. But there's an issue that has been bothering me. There are reports of letters of offer for land sales in areas where people thought they were receiving land deeds. How do you respond to the lack of consultation or public dialogue on these matters?
Well, I think my fundamental issue with this is the deception. Because if the Venezuelans did decide to provide grant funding We didn't have to pay for it
Right.
as a country. But we had to agree that the land the government provides the land and they provide the building.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was. There was never an issue of people being asked to pay for the land. In other words, if an NNP government was in office,
Mm-hmm.
you had never seen anyone. There's an issue. They would have been given the title. Well, how do you pay for the land and have title for the house and not for the land? That's nonsense. So clearly, it's clear tomfoolery. And it is the same condition when we went to China to get all the Chinese homes. Mm-hmm. We had the government to provide the land. And the government of China provide grant funding to build the houses. So that's government responsibility as part of our social services to the less fortunate in our society. And that's why these houses ought not to be given to those of us who can afford to go to a bank and raise a loan and build our own house. These are for people who are not in a position to do this, but can be, based on the concession given by the government, can make a minimal payment on those houses as we go forward. And that was the consistent position of the Venezuelan government then and the Chinese government then. And I don't believe anything has changed. It's just that this government seemed to see an opportunity to get cash from the people of the country and decided that they're not going to give the land as the government then promised. And in each case, it was the government of the New National Party. So it's a bit unfortunate that we see in this being put out there as an issue of problem. I feel for those people. I feel for them because for you have an expectation that you have a home now and you expected to get a deed so you can use it for your future grandchildren or children, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, here come another government with a completely who had no responsibility, no connection with being able to bring these projects to you, and who sometimes you may have voted for and make the change government and turn around and to do that to you. It's unfortunate. And I know they're going to pay they're going to pay a very serious political price for this type of decision, because they seem to believe that people are stupid, that they don't understand when they are being fooled. And I think the biggest mistake politicians like us can make is to believe that we're smarter than people. The people are always ahead of the politician. That's been my experience with the people of this country. Grenadians are not fooled. They know what they want and they know when they're going to be fooled. And sometimes they laugh and smile with you. And the only time you know that they were mad with you is when they go into the ballot box and they put that X and they take the time and put that X. And that's why I remember sometime after an election, a gentleman in our party saying, "Doc, Grenadians wicked we?" I said, the people never wicked yet. We are fooled to believe that they don't understand what is taking place, and they always right. Always tell us, they always right. And when they make a decision, we have to then look at ourselves and say, why did they do it? Instead of blaming them, examine ourselves, correcting their perception that we had sent out there, and then and do what we have to do to convince them that those decisions will not be repeated. That is how I see it going forward.
You've talked about servant leadership. How important is it for leaders to lead by example in times, especially in times of hardship?
Well, Amanda, it's basic. If you are not showing that you're leading by example and showing that you feel for those that you're supposed to be serving, and sometimes you are not able to do it, your closeness to them and the empathy that you show and the willingness to go the extra mile sends a positive message. While I'm not getting this, but you still have hope. And when things change and you give the rationale why it isn't possible. And I think That's what you call, as you say, servant leadership, because that's what it's all about. But sometimes some of us, because we are not used to being in that position, when we get it, it goes to our head. And we feel we're bigger than everybody else. And there's going to come a time when the people will bring us down to earth, so to speak. And the story is always like, when you're going up the ladder, always remember the the people that you meet coming down, because one day you will be coming down, and some of them might be going up at that time, and one has to be extremely careful in the servant leadership is so important in anything you do. You know, if you're captain of a cricket team or football team or a sporting team, and you don't show that empathy with your players, you're not going to get the kind of support. The most successful sporting teams are the ones where there's the unity of effort and feeling of camaraderie and love for each other and fighting for each other. That's what brings success. Sometimes teams become successful champions not because of they had these extremely excellent players. It's the gelling of the feeling of love for one another and willingness to sacrifice and for each other. That's probably more important than the individual talent. The talent is important, but by itself it won't bring you success. And the same thing I would say about politics. Understanding of the empathy, the people, care for people, the love for people, the pain you feel when you see suffering over there. And people understand that. They see when you feel something, and when you're just playing the game and trying to fool them, you know that you're smarter than them, so to speak. The people are always smarter than us, as I said before. And I'm convinced that this government will feel that pain at the next general elections.
Okay, so Doc, I'm giving you one word, and I just want you can say anything on it, just expound on it. So your word is courage.
Yes, courage is a fundamental word that all of us must have, to stand and face the consequences of an action that you take that may not necessarily be popular. I think it's important, and I give you examples of this. The importation of stone here, people, they were condemning the action, and I knew it was right. And I faced the consequences. And I believe there are a lot of people in Grenada today that's standing up for certain things that they believe in. Some of them are paying a heavy price, but they show courage. And courage is a word I think we all must, as we grow older, we must always demonstrate a level of courage. Because that is so important for a successful life.
Well, that's all the time we have for today, Doc. Thank you so much. And guys, remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Show them